welcome to tonight's journey into Silent Hill. Let me know down in the comments where you're tuning in from, and if you're into these long, late-night lore dives, subscribing is the easiest way to keep up. Now let's get right to it. The Dog Ending Key Path. Silent Hill 2 hides one of the strangest Easter eggs in horror gaming, the infamous dog ending. Unlike the more somber finales, this one is pure parody, suggesting that the entire nightmare was orchestrated by a Shiba Inu in a control room. But unlocking it isn't simple. First, you must have cleared the game at least once to trigger New Game Plus. Only then does the dog key appear inside a doghouse near Jack's Inn, an otherwise unremarkable location. Later, after watching the videotape in room 312 of the Lakeview Hotel, you can use that key on the observation room. Doing so reveals the secret, silly truth. Mira the dog has been pulling the levers all along. It's a bizarre counterweight to the game's heavy themes, proving Team Silent had a dark sense of humor about their own work. Extra riddle level exists. Most players who finish Silent Hill 2 assume the game's difficulty options are straightforward, easy, normal, and hard for riddles and combat, but there's a hidden twist. After you've beaten the game on every riddle level, the developers quietly unlock a secret setting called Extra. From that point forward, choosing hard doesn't always mean you'll get the same puzzles again. It silently alternates between hard and extra each time. The extra level reconfigures certain riddles into even stranger, more cryptic forms, designed to keep veterans from solving them by memory. It's one of those invisible layers that proves Team Silent wanted players to feel uncertainty, even on repeat playthroughs. Bullet Adjust Multiplier. Silent Hill 2 is famous for its oppressive atmosphere, where scarcity of resources builds tension, but hidden in the game's menus is a secret way to flip that balance entirely. After your first clear, you can access an extra options menu that includes something called Bullet Adjust. Here you can raise all ammo pickups by 2 or even 3 times their normal amount. Suddenly, the same dark streets and cramped corridors are littered with resources. What once felt like survival horror becomes something closer to power fantasy, a new way to experience the game. It's a subtle feature, but it shows how the developers expected fans to play Silent Hill 2, not just once, but over and over, experimenting with different moods of fear. UFO Ending and the Blue Gem. While Silent Hill 2's original release contained the dog ending as its gag finale, later versions added another surreal twist, the UFO ending. Available in the Greatest Hits, Director's Cut, PC, and HD collection, it requires an item called the Blue Gem. To unlock the scene, you must use the gem in 3 very specific moments. First in the hospital's garden after defeating Flesh Lips, then on the dock after your confrontation with Eddie, and finally in room 312 before watching the videotape. Complete all 3, and James is abducted by aliens in a cutscene that gleefully parodies sci-fi cliches. This ending breaks tone completely, but its placement in later releases shows how Silent Hill's developers loved rewarding obsessive players with secrets that bend the rules of the narrative. Born from a Wish sub-scenario. When Silent Hill 2 was re-released in its expanded editions, it came bundled with an additional scenario titled Born from a Wish. This side story stars Maria before she encounters James, offering players a chance to see the world briefly through her eyes. It's a shorter campaign, set mainly within the mansion of Ernest Baldwin, and it explores Maria's strange uncertainty about her own existence. The developers explicitly recommended playing it only after finishing the main story, since it reveals details that spoil Maria's nature. Born from a Wish deepens the ambiguity of her character. Is she a real person, or simply a construct of James's grief and desire? The sub-scenario doesn't provide answers so much as it offers more haunting questions. PAL 2-disc set. When Silent Hill 2 first released in Europe, players there received something that fans in North America never saw: a second disc. Packaged alongside the main game was a special Making of Silent Hill 2 DVD, filled with behind-the-scenes interviews, concept art, and production diaries. It offered rare glimpses into Team Silent's creative process, including Masahiro Ito discussing monster designs and Akira Yamaoka explaining the approach to sound. For many years, this disc was one of the only official ways fans could peek behind the curtain of the game's development. Its inclusion also highlights how differently regions were treated. While Japanese and European players got extra content, American fans had to wait until the greatest hits release to see anything comparable. Today, copies of this PAL 2-disc set are collector's items, prized for the exclusive documentary that captures Team Silent at the height of their powers. PC version perks. The original PC release of Silent Hill 2, while sometimes criticized for technical quirks, actually introduced features that console players didn't get at all. Among the most notable was the ability to save anywhere, removing the reliance on red memo squares. It also added a quick weapon swap function, making combat smoother, and a movie gallery that let fans replay every cutscene without needing to reload a save. For players who had already completed the PlayStation 2 version, the PC port felt like a more flexible way to revisit the story. Over time, dedicated fans created the Enhanced Edition mod, which polished visuals, restored cut content, and fixed bugs. What began as an uneven port has since become the definitive way to experience Silent Hill 2 on modern systems, thanks to a community determined to preserve the masterpiece. Laura sees no monsters. One of the most fascinating details about Silent Hill 2's story is that Laura, the young girl James encounters, never sees the monsters that terrify him. Canon materials and developer commentary confirm this is intentional. Laura has no guilt or trauma for the town to prey on. To her, Silent Hill looks like a perfectly ordinary town. This makes her one of the only characters to walk its streets untouched, wandering freely through areas that nearly destroyed James and Maria. It's also why her behavior seems so odd. She strolls casually through environments filled with dangers the player can see but she cannot. This choice underscores the game's central theme. Silent Hill manifests differently depending on who enters it. For James, it is filled with guilt-shaped nightmares. For Laura, it is simply a place where her friend Mary once lived, untainted by horror. Angela Orozco. Name and age clarified. Silent Hill 2 is careful with its character details, and Angela is a great example of how small facts shape big interpretations. Her surname is Orozco, often misspelled online as Orozco, and official materials list her age as 19. Knowing she's a teenager reframes the weight of her story. Angela's trauma, her mistrust of adults, and her instinct to see every space as hostile all track with someone who never had a safe place to grow up. Players sometimes project an older age onto her because of how hardened she seems, but the truth emphasizes the tragedy. She's still a kid, wandering the same hell as James, but with fewer tools and no illusions that anyone will save her. Every scene with Angela hits harder once you lock those facts in. She's not jaded by years, she's wounded by youth. Pyramid Head versus Red Pyramid Thing. The game never formally calls the executioner Pyramid Head in dialogue. In documents and descriptions, he's the Red Pyramid Thing, a title that sounds more clinical than mythic. Fans use Pyramid Head because it's easier, and because James himself can label him that way when examining the impaled bodies after the duo confrontation in the hotel. That quiet, optional line is fascinating. It suggests James is trying to pin a name on something born from his psyche, like naming a fear to make it manageable. The ambiguity is intentional. Red pyramid thing frames the creature as a function, judgment, punishment, not a character. Pyramid Head turns him into an icon. Silent Hill 2 sits in that tension, letting you decide whether you're facing a symbol that must be understood or a monster that must be survived. The red save squares and memory. Those ominous red squares you touch to save aren't just a UI flourish. They're part of Silent Hill 2's language about memory and denial. Early saves feel like lifelines, brief chances to breathe. But by the end of the game, when you reach the corridor lined with multiple red squares, the image becomes thematic, a hallway of checkpoints before truth, a gallery of moments you wish you could undo. Official commentary ties the red motif to unrepressed memories and inner reckoning. Mechanically, nothing changes. You still save. Psychologically, everything changes. The final grid of red squares feels like James standing before a wall of his own choices, forced to face what he's been avoiding since the opening letter. It's a brilliant example of Silent Hill turning a simple mechanic into a narrative mirror. Team Silent's field research and real-town inspirations. Silent Hill 2 didn't spring purely from imagination. Team Silent took cameras and notebooks into real neighborhoods to capture the mundane textures that make the town feel lived in. Art leads have mentioned scouting American suburbs, strip mall facades, and older industrial blocks to study how grime collects on signage, how asphalt cracks near curb seams, and how fluorescent bulbs cast that sickly, humming light. These small observations became the backbone of South Vale's streets and interiors. It's why the game's alleys feel navigable even when you're lost, and why storefronts seem familiar even if you've never been there. The design philosophy was simple. Build a convincing normal, then let James's psyche warp it. The result is a town that feels like memory, recognizable, faded, and just wrong enough to make your stomach drop. Ambiguity by design, cutting what explains too much. Throughout development, Team Silent repeatedly trimmed scenes, sounds, and lines that over-explain the narrative. Early cuts reportedly included harsher audio for Mary's suffocation, more explicit gore in certain encounters, and trailer bits that spelled out connections the final game leaves implied. The guiding idea was that Silent Hill 2 should be interpretive art, not a solved puzzle. If a scene handed you one definitive reading, it risked closing the door on others, so it was pared back until tone, framing, and symbol did the heavy lifting. That's why debates about timelines, hallucinations, and what James really sees are still alive decades later. The game trusts the player to be a co-author, filling negative space with personal inference. It's not vagueness for its own sake. It's emotional precision created by narrative restraint. Sound as atmosphere, footsteps, silence, and randomized dread. Akira Yamaoka's approach to Silent Hill 2's audio goes far beyond its famous tracks. The team built an unusually large library of footstep variations on different surfaces so that simple movement wouldn't loop into obvious repetition. In many areas, ambient score gives way to designed silence, punctured by randomized stingers, distant metal clatters, breaths, or muffled sobs that don't always trigger the same way twice. This unpredictability trains you to fear the spaces between sounds, not just the loud moments. It also supports the game's theme. James's perception is unstable, so the world's noises should feel unstable too. By making audio behave a little like memory, reliable until it isn't, the game sustains tension without resorting to constant music or jump scares, turning corridors into instruments that play your nerves. The videotape and why the hotel changes afterward. Lakeview Hotel doesn't just feel different after James watches the videotape, it behaves different. Before room 312, the hotel presents as a melancholy, almost pristine space, a bittersweet refuge from the rust and rot you've trudged through. After James confronts what's on the tape, the hotel shifts toward the other world, charred walls, flooded rooms, burned-in memories that reframe earlier areas. This isn't a random difficulty spike, it's a dramaturgical switch. Silent Hill often mirrors inner realization with environmental mutation, and the tape is James's point of no return. The world can't protect his denial anymore, so it stops pretending. That transition also primes the ending corridor of red save squares. The path to truth is littered with moments you can't take back, and the hotel's facelift is the game telling you there's no going back either. Pyramid Head's weapons and the judgment motif. Pyramid Head's arsenal isn't just for show, it tracks a theme of execution and judgment that runs through James's psyche. The great knife is brutally heavy, forcing deliberate, punishing swings that make you feel the weight of violence. The great spear, tied in imagery to historical execution scenes, and the judgment painting in the historical society, was originally planned to appear later, after that museum context teaches you how to see him, not as a slasher villain, but as an executioner. Production realities shuffled some of that timing, so you encounter the spear earlier than intended, but the symbolism still lands. There were even early ideas for less scripted street encounters at night to make PH feel like a roaming sentence, not a boss. Whether knife or spear, he remains the town's verdict made flesh, slow, inevitable, and impossible to ignore. Bubblehead nurses. Memory, illness, and censorship. The nurses are often read as pure sexualization, but Silent Hill 2 layers them with illness, resentment, and medical helplessness. Their latex-like uniforms, transfusion stands, and jerky gait tie directly to hospital memories around Mary's treatment, while the ballooned masks suggest muffled identity and dehumanization. Faceless caretakers who can't comfort or communicate. Early concepts reportedly toyed with different head effects, including bursting masks and alternate props before settling on the pipe, a bleak rhyme with the lead pipe from Silent Hill 1. Trailers once showed nurses outdoors in the fog, imagery later trimmed, and a shot of Pyramid Head dragging a nurse was cut for censorship. The final design walks a tightrope. It's undeniably provocative, but the provocation is weaponized to make players uncomfortable about how desire, fear, and medical trauma tangle in James's mind. The videotape's missing scream and why it matters. Early cuts of Silent Hill 2 reportedly included harsher audio during the videotape sequence, most notably an audible struggle and Mary's scream as James suffocates her. In the released game, that sound is absent, and the tape plays with a clinical quiet that forces you to supply the horror yourself. This change isn't just censorship, it's craft. By removing explicit distress, Team Silent preserved the story's interpretive space. Was the act rage, panic, resignation, or a twisted form of mercy? The silence lets players project their own anxieties onto the scene, which is far more psychologically destabilizing than a definitive audio cue. It also aligns with the game's larger ethos. Avoid answers that lock the door and let implication do the wounding. Eddie's spaces tell his story before he does. Eddie Dombrowski's arc is tracked as much by rooms as by dialogue. You first meet him in a bowling alley, grazing on pizza, a mundane, almost comic setting that disarms you. Later, you confront him in the cafeteria beneath the prison, then the meat locker, where breath plumes and carcasses hang like accusations. Each space escalates his isolation and self-justification, from shrugging off cruelty as jokes to framing murder as defense. The temperature drops, the lighting hardens, and his language follows. Resentment curdles into persecution mania. By the time he brandishes his gun, the rooms have already argued his case. A man who retreats into comfort, then corners, then violence. Silent Hill 2 uses level geography as character study, turning architecture into a mirror for Eddie's denial, hunger, and fear. Tuca Lakes face, the hot guy note, and a fire that lingers. Tuca Lake's postcard beauty is built from a real photograph of Derwent Water in England, altered into a melancholy skyline for South Vale. That serene image contrasts with the game's scattered hints of catastrophe. Most curiously, the Lakeview Hotel lounge heater note, "I'm Johnny, one hot guy." On a first read, it's a goofy throwaway, placed alongside later prison area paintings that depict the hotel on fire. It starts to feel like a breadcrumb. Fans connect these details into a grim town rumor. Lakeview carried a literal burn in its history long before James's personal otherworld sears the walls. Whether or not Johnny is canonically linked to the blaze matters less than the pattern. Mundane artifacts, offhand notes, and background art spool into a portrait of a resort built over smoldering memory, where warmth is always one spark away from ruin. The Torah Lake typo. Maps in Silent Hill 2 usually function as anchors. James scribbles notes, doors get marked, and the layout helps the player build confidence in a world designed to disorient. But even the maps have their quirks. On one version of the in-game South Vale map, Tuca Lake is misspelled as Torah Lake. It's a small, almost throwaway detail, but it became one of those bits of trivia that fans cling to. Was it a localization error? A deliberate off-touch to make you question the reliability of even James's drawings? Team Silent never clarified, which only makes it more intriguing. In a game about perception and mistakes of memory, even a typo can feel like a sly, thematic nod. Brook Haven's changing signage. When you enter Brook Haven Hospital, one of the first visual cues is its exterior signage. In the original PlayStation 2 release, it actually read B Haven Hospital. Later editions and Silent Hill 3 corrected it to Brook Haven. Fans have speculated about the change. Was it an honest error, a localization quirk, or another of Team Silent's subtle methods of unsettling players? After all, Silent Hill thrives on environments that almost feel familiar until something is just wrong. That tiny abbreviation could be read as an innocent slip, or as another way the game constantly nudges players to question what's real, what's distorted, and whether James is seeing the world as it truly is. Texan gas and The Simpsons coincidence. One of the stranger Easter eggs in Silent Hill 2 comes from a background asset, Texan gas, a fictional brand plastered across pumps and signage. Years later, fans noticed Texan gas also appeared in an episode of The Simpsons. While there's no known connection, most likely it's coincidence, since Texan is a believable parody of real oil companies. It sparked countless discussions online. Could it have been a wink from a designer, or just parallel invention? Either way, it's a fun example of how Silent Hill's grounded world design often blurs with the everyday. Even its gas stations look so believable that people start spotting them in other corners of pop culture. The observation deck as a mission statement. Silent Hill 2 opens at the observation deck overlooking Tuca Lake, And that quiet, static setup is a design manifesto. There's no bombastic tutorial, no monster lunging from the dark, just James, a mirror, and a letter from his dead wife. The camera lingers, asking you to sit with the premise instead of fleeing it. Stepping outside, the wind off the lake and the distant road noise do more world building than any exposition dump. This pace teaches you how to read the game. Attention over aggression, atmosphere over action. By the time you walk the forest path toward town, you've already absorbed the rules. This is a story that hides meaning in pauses, and your curiosity is either going to save you or lead you exactly where the letter wants. The prison bathroom scream you might miss. Down in Toluca prison, there's a women's bathroom door that players often poke just to see if anything happens. If you knock and start to walk away, a piercing scream can suddenly ring out from behind the door. It's an optional audio stinger, easy to miss, and that's the point. Silent Hill 2 uses micro events like this to keep you unsettled without telegraphing content. No jump scare camera cut, no monster bursting through, just a sound that raises questions your brain can't stop answering. Who screamed? Was it real or a projection? James's guilt and fear are doing the heavy lifting, and the designers know it. By resisting spectacle, moments like this feel personal, as if the town is reacting specifically to you and your decision to pry where you shouldn't. A Sybil Bennett ghost in the machine. Deep in early development materials and tech demos, Team Silent reportedly reused a character model from the first game, Sybil Bennett, as a walk-around test inside an early cafe space, a stand-in for Cafe 5-2. That mundane detail says a lot about the sequel's DNA. Rather than building everything from scratch, the team iterated on tools and pipelines proven on Silent Hill 1, then funneled resources into what mattered for SH2, richer lighting, heavier atmosphere, and more expressive animation on faces and hands. Seeing a SH1 character strolling through an SH2 prototype is like glimpsing the studio's workshop, pragmatic, scrappy, and focused on mood over tech showboating. It's also a neat meta echo, the past haunting the present while the team shapes something new from familiar bones. Counting hallucinations. An intentional clue, not a trick. Fans have long debated how real Silent Hill 2's events are, and one developer hint adds fuel in a productive way. Consider how many hallucinations James experiences. This isn't licensed to hand-wave the whole plot as a dream. It's a prompt about pattern recognition. Track every moment where the world behaves like a projection. Doors that shouldn't connect. Spaces that fold into themselves. People who appear exactly when James needs them. Do the math across key scenes, and you start seeing a rhythm. Spikes of unreality coincide with guilt triggers. The hospital, the videotape, the final corridor. The point isn't to declare everything fake. It's to notice how the town modulates perception as James approaches the truth. Counting hallucination beats turns, speculation into close reading, revealing craft in what first feels like chaos. Room 2, O2's photo collage, memory compressed into clues. In Blue Creek Apartments, James enters room 202 and finds a wall collage of photo clippings and distorted images. On a surface level, it's set dressing, some weirdo's scrapbook. Look closer, and it functions like a subconscious mood board for the entire game. Several images read like compressed echoes of characters and monsters you've met or will meet, as if James is walking through a crude externalization of his headspace. The collage's placement matters too, early enough to seem random, late enough that returning players recognize how many elements map onto later reveals. Silent Hill frequently hides meaning in mundane props, And room 202 is a prime example, an arts and crafts omen that foreshadows the revelation about the letter, the tape, and why every corridor feels like deja vu constructed out of guilt. The great knife changes how you move and how you think. Picking up Pyramid Head's great knife is more than a power fantasy. It's a design experiment in player psychology. Mechanically, it slows James to a plodding, vulnerable gait, turning every swing into a commitment with a recovery window you can't easily cancel. The weapon forces you to feel the cost of violence, its weight, its risk, its performative cruelty. On New Game Plus, carrying it through earlier areas reshapes encounters you once sprinted past. Now you calculate spacing, corridor width, and whether you can stomach another labored downswing. Even when you holster it, the knife lingers as an idea, tempting you to solve fear with brute force. Silent Hill 2 then counters that instinct with enemies and layouts that punish overconfidence, reminding you that power in this town is always double-edged, useful but never free. Pyramid Head's first appearances were almost random. In the final game, Pyramid Head enters in carefully scripted encounters, a shadow behind bars, a staged apartment tableau, or a terrifying chase. But early development notes suggest Team Silent considered a version where he could appear unscripted on the streets of Silent Hill during nighttime exploration. Imagine wandering the foggy blocks and suddenly spotting him in the distance, his knife scraping the asphalt without fanfare. It would have amplified his role as executioner, less a boss fight, more a constant sentence stalking James. The idea was dropped, probably for pacing and technical reasons, but it shows how fluid Pyramid Head's identity was in development. Even without random encounters, his final form carries that aura of inevitability. He doesn't belong to set pieces. He belongs to judgment itself. The laundry room trailer that never made it. One of Silent Hill 2's pre-release trailers showcased a chilling sequence that doesn't exist in the final game. James hides inside a laundry room, watching in fear as Pyramid Head drags the great knife down a hallway. The scraping sound echoes, but instead of the encounter escalating into combat, the footage cuts, leaving the threat unresolved. This moment was never playable, and no known build contains it. It seems to have been created solely for promotion. Fans speculate it was cut because it overlapped too much with later chase sequences or because it revealed Pyramid Head too early. Still, its imagery lingers in the fan imagination, a ghostly what if that deepens the legend of SH2's lost content. The Great Spear and a judgment delayed. In the version of Silent Hill 2 that shipped, Pyramid Head wields the Great Spear earlier than originally intended. Developers wanted him to acquire it later, specifically after the player sees the judgment painting in the historical society. That reveal would have tied his weapon directly to the town's iconography, James encountering the symbol first, then the manifestation. But practical concerns about pacing and encounter variety meant the spear shows up sooner, divorcing it slightly from its symbolic origin. Even so, fans still connect the dots. The spear is executioner's tool, a theatrical instrument of justice in Toluca's history. It reinforces Pyramid Head not as a monster that fights, but as an avatar of punishment, reminding James that every step deeper into the town is also a step closer to a verdict he cannot appeal. The cut shot of Pyramid Head dragging a nurse. Among the most talked about pieces of missing content is a trailer shot where Pyramid Head drags a nurse along the floor. It's brief, ugly, and instantly communicates his role as executioner rather than simple boss. That image never appears in the shipping game. Accounts from the period point to ratings pressure and tone management. Team Silent was already walking a line between psychological dread and explicit cruelty, and showcasing PH abusing a human-shaped figure risked tipping the balance into pure shock. The removal actually strengthens the final text. By implying more than it shows, Silent Hill 2 keeps Pyramid Head's violence symbolic, punishment embodied, so when you do witness acts of brutality, they feel like intrusions into an already heavy moral landscape, rather than gore set pieces engineered for spectacle. Bubblehead nurses, inspirations, iterations, and the final read. The Bubblehead nurse design is a collage of references filtered through James's psyche. Creators have cited medical imagery, fetish fashion, and cinematic influences like Jacob's Ladder and The Exorcist, the Three. Early iterations reportedly tested alternative head concepts, acid-scarred faces, gas masks, even a bursting balloon effect, before the team locked in the suffocating latex sheen and muffled mouths. Weapon ideas shifted too, from transfusion stands to the blunt pipe, a utilitarian match for their mechanical stop-start movement. What matters is the synthesis. Illness, resentment, attraction, and fear are compacted into one silhouette that's hard to look at and hard to forget. Read in context, the nurses aren't a winking pin-up. They're the mortifying embodiment of hospital trauma where caregiving and objectification overlap, turning compassion into choreography that hurts. 36. A beast of the mind. 9. Manifestations to watch. Silent Hill 2's enemies make most sense when you treat them as a rotating gallery of James's inner states. Pyramid Head externalizes judgment and the urge to punish. Lying figures, sealed in straitjacket flesh, wheeze toxic bile like bottled up guilt leaking out. Mannequins double and dismember the body, echoing fractured desire. Mandarins thrash beneath grates you can barely reach, a picture of buried anguish. Abstract Daddy is a blunt sledgehammer of trauma, crushing any pretense of refinement. Flesh lips suspend victims as if confession were a medical procedure. And then there are the human apparitions, Maria and even Mary, who move like boss fights in slow motion, testing whether James wants absolution or indulgence. Track these 9 motifs across areas, and you'll notice the game quietly rearranging them as James gets closer to the truth, like a mind shuffling symptoms before a final diagnosis. Mandarins, monsters you mostly hear, not fight. The Mandarin is one of Silent Hill 2's strangest creatures because it's designed less as an enemy and more as a psychological sound installation. You rarely fight them head on. Instead, they thrash beneath floor grates, their elongated arms clawing up from a space you can't comfortably reach. That staging matters. It places the monster literally under you, out of sight, half audible, and safely distant until the clatter of metal and frantic scraping makes your body react anyway. Designers have described them as manifestations of buried anguish and helplessness, which aligns with the encounter design. You keep moving, but their presence nags at you like a suppressed memory. Even when you do line up a shot through the grate, the kill feels unsatisfying, like swatting at something you can't properly confront. The Mandarin teaches Silent Hill's other lesson. Horror is often the pain you step over. Why SH3's closer feels related to SH2's Mandarin. Players often notice that Silent Hill 3's closer shares a silhouette language with SH2's Mandarin, heavy limbs, awkward reach, and an unsettling sense that the enemy wants to corner rather than simply pounce. That resemblance isn't a copy-paste. It's a statement about how the town's power shapes forms across different psyches. In Heather's story, the closer reads as suffocating proximity, an embodiment of boundaries being pushed, privacy invaded, safety pressed shut. In James's journey, The Mandarin is literally repressed pain beneath the grate. The echo between the two designs shows Team Silent working with a toolkit of gestures, reach, weight, distance, impediment, to express different inner lives. It's world building through choreography. The same supernatural language speaks in two dialects, translating guilt in SH2 and violation in SH3. The result deepens both games, implying a consistent metaphysics beneath their separate nightmares. The nurse heads that almost exploded before settling on the suffocating, balloon-smooth masks of the Bubblehead nurses. Team Silent reportedly experimented with a more visceral effect, heads that would burst on critical hits, popping like overinflated latex. It's not hard to imagine why the idea was dropped. Too goofy in motion, too gory for the game's restrained tone, and too on the nose for a design that works best as metaphor. The final mask is creepier precisely because it doesn't rupture. It denies release. You're left with a face that can't breathe and can't speak, an image of care turned to silence. That choice lines up with SH2's larger aesthetic, when horror stays just beneath the surface, pressure without explosion. It breeds dread rather than cheap shock. Keeping the heads intact also reinforces the medical fetish undertone without tipping into splatter, preserving the uneasy balance between allure, illness, and inarticulate need that defines the nurse's impact. From transfusion stands to pipes, nurses' weapon shift. Early design passes equipped the Bubblehead nurses with blood transfusion stands, a prop that screamed hospital but clashed with the way the enemies moved. The stands read as medical but proved cumbersome for pathing and attack timing. Their arcs were wide, their silhouettes busy, and the hit feedback felt mushy. Switching to the steel pipe simplified everything. A single, brutal line that swung fast, landed with a sick thud, and echoed the franchise's iconic melee tool from Silent Hill 1. The pipe made the nurse's stop-start lurches feel more dangerous, and it tightened animation loops so encounters were readable but still chaotic. Symbolically, the swap is clever. An object meant for repair becomes a bludgeon. Care becomes harm. The hospital's promise of treatment collapses into a weapon that beats back panic rather than soothing it, mirroring James's urge to fix things with force. Nurses in the streets, a trailer, image that wasn't canon. Pre-release footage once showed Bubblehead nurses outdoors in fog-covered streets, an image that instantly grabbed attention because it violated our learned rule. Nurses belong in hospitals, not intersections. The shot did its job in trailers, unease spikes when safe categories blur, but it didn't survive to the final game. Keeping nurses largely interior preserves Silent Hill 2's psychological logic. Enemies emerge from contextual spaces tied to James's mind. When nurses spill into sidewalks, they stop feeling like private obsessions and start feeling like generic threats. By confining them to corridors, wards, and basement service areas, Team Silent keeps the metaphor tight. The town may twist reality in public, but the worst nightmares still live behind closed doors, where whispered diagnoses and beeping monitors turn compassion into choreography. The cut trailer moment remains a fascinating near miss. Cool image, wrong grammar for SH2's symbolism. The aesthetic recipe, Jacob's Ladder, The Exorcist 3, and fetish wear. Ask fans where the nurse's look comes from, and you'll hear a familiar trio. Jacob's Ladder for the jittery, frame-skipped movement. The Exorcist 3 for cold hospital menace and murder tableau, and fetish fashion for latex sheen, heels, and a weaponized silhouette. What matters is how Silent Hill 2 remixes those inputs. The latex shine isn't about titillation, it's about suffocation and anonymity. Faces become smooth balloons, Mouths erased, breath implied but denied. The heels don't glamorize, they destabilize gait, making every step feel like a forced performance. And the Jacob's Ladder shudder effect isn't a gimmick, it's a visual stutter that mirrors James's fractured memory. By braiding cinema, subculture, and medical realism, the design arrives at something uniquely SH2, a nurse who looks assembled from attraction, fear, and resentment, then set to a rhythm that makes your stomach knot long before your health bar drops. Alternative nurse designs that never left the sketchbook. Masahiro Ito, the creature designer for Silent Hill 2, once shared concept sketches of alternate nurse variations that never made it into the game. Among them were designs nicknamed the Acid Nurse, Twin Tail Nurse, and a version with a gas mask. Each leaned harder into horror tropes: acid corrosion, grotesque doubling, suffocating wartime imagery, but none matched the quiet balance the final Bubblehead nurse struck. Those designs looked striking, but they risked turning the enemy into a sideshow act rather than a subconscious echo of James's guilt. By paring down to the now iconic latex mask and jerky animation, Team Silent made the nurse feel universal and uncomfortable instead of tied to one single metaphor. Seeing the alternates today is fascinating, but it underlines why restraint was the better choice. Subtle horror lasts longer than spectacle. The nurse's long afterlife in spin-offs and cameos. The Bubblehead nurse design proved so iconic that it outlived Silent Hill 2, resurfacing in spin-offs and even unrelated titles. They appear in Silent Hill, The Escape on Mobile, and in Silent Hill, Book of Memories, often as familiar enemy templates rather than thematic mirrors. Their strangest cameo might be in Super Bomberman R, where a nurse joins Pyramid Head as a playable bomber skin, a surreal collision of horror and cartoon chaos. These reuses strip the creature of its original psychological context, turning it into shorthand for Silent Hill. While purists lament this flattening, it also proves how powerful the design became. The image of the nurse, anonymous, sexualized, and terrifying, grew larger than its metaphor, evolving into a franchise mascot even when divorced from James Sunderland's personal nightmare. The 9 manifestations of James's subconscious. Silent Hill 2's monsters aren't random. They map onto James's inner turmoil like a distorted bestiary of guilt. Developers and fans often describe 9 core manifestations: Pyramid Head, punishment; Bubblehead nurses, desire and medical trauma; lying figures, guilt bottled up; mannequins, fractured sexuality; Mandarins, buried anguish; abstract daddy, family trauma; flesh lips, medicalized suffering; Maria, idealized fantasy; and Mary herself, the real wife twisted by memory. Seen together, they form a psychological ecosystem where every enemy enacts a role James refuses to confront. The brilliance is that the game never explains this outright. You piece it together through context, design language, and your own discomfort. By aligning mechanics, visuals, and narrative, Silent Hill 2 turns its monster roster into a psychiatric chart written in blood and latex. Laura's outfit and the Con Air connection. Laura may seem like the most grounded character in Silent Hill 2, but even she carries layers of design trivia. Her clothing, a striped shirt and overalls, bears a striking resemblance to Casey Poe, the young girl from the 1997 film Con Air. Whether intentional homage or a subconscious lift, the likeness is uncanny enough that fans still compare screenshots side by side. The choice matters because it grounds Laura visually in a kind of Americana innocence. She looks like she stepped out of a family drama, not a horror story, which makes her presence in James's nightmare all the more jarring. Unlike the monsters, she isn't grotesque or distorted. She is ordinary. That dissonance emphasizes her purity of perspective. The only person in town untouched by its horrors looks like someone plucked from everyday life. The teddy bear motif in Born from a Wish. In the sub-scenario Born from a Wish, Maria slips up in a line of dialogue. She mentions that Laura loves teddy bears, then abruptly corrects herself with, "Who am I talking about?" That small exchange is loaded with meaning. It suggests that Maria's memories are stitched together from scraps of Mary's life, not fully her own. Teddy bears then become a quiet motif connecting Laura, Mary, and Maria across scenes. In the hospital, James finds Laura playing with teddy bears before the Flesh Lips fight, reinforcing the connection. What seems like childish window dressing is really a symbolic tether, innocence colliding with grief, comfort warped into uncanny foreshadowing. In a game obsessed with doubling and projection, teddy bears function as soft, fuzzy reminders that even children's toys aren't immune from Silent Hill's distortions. The Reverse Will and Laura's Prayer. One of Silent Hill 2's most haunting tracks is The Reverse Will, an ambient piece woven with backward voices. If you reverse the audio, you hear a bedtime prayer spoken in Laura's voice. "Now I lay me down to sleep. I pray the Lord my soul to keep." The choice is chilling. A child's innocent ritual of protection becomes inverted, warped into something uncanny when played backward. It reinforces Laura's role as a pure figure in a corrupted world, her words literally twisted by the nightmare surrounding her. For James, the prayer is unheard and irrelevant. For the player, it's a jarring reminder of innocence bent out of shape. Silent Hill 2 excels at this, taking something ordinary, even wholesome, and distorting it until you feel uneasy about ever having found it comforting in the first place. Laura's cut song, "Ring Around the Rosie," as Omen, pre-release footage once showed Laura tracing words on a wall while softly singing "Ring Around the Rosie." It's a fleeting image, but thematically loaded. The nursery rhyme, often, if incorrectly, linked to plague folklore, carries a sing-song cadence about sickness, circles, and falling down. Hearing it in Silent Hill 2 would have framed Laura as a kind of eerie chorus, the only character untouched by monsters, casually invoking a communal rhyme about invisible illness. Cutting the moment preserves the game's restraint, but the idea lingers in fan memory because it's so on brand. SH2 loves turning childhood artifacts into unsettling mirrors. Laura's voice, unafraid and offhand, would have underscored the gap between her experience of the town and James's, where every hallway feels contagious with guilt. An older Laura in a canceled concept. In early pitches around Homecoming, one proposed cameo imagined an older Laura wearing a jacket reminiscent of James's during the boat sequence, an overt bridge between eras. The notion never shipped, but it's fascinating to consider how it would have reframed Silent Hill 2. Seeing Laura grown up, echoing James's silhouette, implies survival threaded with memory. The child who saw a normal town now carrying the visual shorthand of the man crushed by it. It would have invited questions about what Laura kept, forgot, or learned, and whether Silent Hill marks people even when they don't see its monsters. The idea was likely dropped to avoid overlinking timelines, but as a thought experiment, it's potent. A living epilogue glimpsed in a borrowed coat. Hyperspray ranks. The Hyperspray is one of Silent Hill 2's most infamous, unlockable weapons, but what most players don't realize is that it changes depending on your performance. The spray's color reflects the rank of your last playthrough. Purple, white, yellow, and finally green each unlock new powers, with the green version considered almost game-breaking. Green Hyperspray can instantly end some boss encounters. trivializing enemies that once felt overwhelming. At the lowest ranks, however, it is weaker and less reliable. This design encourages mastery. The better you perform, the more dangerous the weapon becomes. It's both a reward and a commentary, as if the game itself is mocking your need for power in a world built on suffering.